Are you interested in purchasing a replica diecast similar to the one that Todd Kidd used to win this year's Ajax 200, the one that defending champion Cameron Atwood used to win the first night race at Disney, the one that Todd Kidd used to win his 10th milestone Ajax Cup victory at Belltown, or the one that Laquan Scranton used to win under the lights in the Ajax All-Star race? Well, if you are, you're in luck. Head on over to Circle B Diecast Plan B Sales and use coupon code ASCA on any orders $20 or more to acquire free shipping at checkout.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. I am your host, Charles Fallon, back in here for yet another episode. And boy, do we have a lot to cover after a chaotic weekend of racing at the Stone Yard. It's hard to believe we only have 5 ASCA events remaining in 2024 as we now enter the month of June. This will come out on June 1st. So this is the final month of the season. 3 weeks remain. 3 cup races remain. 2 Craftsman races remain. And we got a lot to cover to preview this final home stretch to the championships being decided in Belltown on June 18th and 19th at the Craftsman and Cup levels. But first off, we got to talk about big race Brynn with yet another clutch moment in a late race presser pack situation. The late race incident between Renard and Carson Schmidt will, of course, be breaking that all down. Can anyone stop Diego Urquidy? He has 3 races remaining from his record-tying 4 championship lead Shane Park by over a full race at this point. Let's also recap the Craftsman Series championship battle because, oh my goodness, absolutely chaotically wild Lily Diabetes 100 completely shakes up the championship picture in the Craftsman Series. So that championship is far from over if you think the Cup one is. Then we got a really interesting free agent signing from Snoots Enterprises. Lucas Sam Bear receives his second chance at the Cup level in the number 8 car. I'll give my thoughts and reactions on that as well. And then previewing this week's lone ASC event, the Apple 225 at the historic Computer Motor Speedway. It's going to be a really pivotal one in deciding whether or not Park and Todd Kidd and Laquan Scranton have any shot of tracking down Diego Urquidy. If they want to do so, they need to win this upcoming week. But first, before we get into this jam-packed episode of the ASCA Weekly Podcast, we got to shout out the ASCA's premier partners, as always. Rowdy Energy, you already know the drill. Click the top link, second to top link in bio on the ASCA's link tree because, of course, we got the most popular driver voting open. So click the second link in bio. Head on over to Rowdy Energy, get yourself a Rowdy Energy drink. Circle B Diecast, Plan B Sales if you want to cop the replica diecast that Brynn Renard just used to pull off his 4th Crown Jewel victory. Head on over to Circle B Diecast, Plan B Sales, and also at Paint Scheme Stalker on Instagram. Yeah, go give him a follow as well. Really solid page by him. So shout out to all of those guys and all they do for the sport. And let's get into it. So we'll begin with big race Brynn. As I said it again, he strikes yet again his second Northern 200 victory in the past 5 years, becoming only the second driver to win this race multiple times, joining Diego Urquidy in that camp. Renard becomes only the second driver to win at the Stone Yard more than twice, also joining Diego Urquidy in that camp. And it's yet another, I think this performance from Renard on Saturday night proves why there is a bidding war between Michael White Racing and Taylor Motorsports to make him the highest paid driver in the ASCA. Yes, he's going to be 33 years old next season. Yes, he only has 8 career wins to his credit. But when you have 4 of them in Crown Jewel races, I believe he's one of only 3 drivers to complete that elusive crown jewel sweep, and he was the first to do it, mind you, way back in 2020. He did it before even Diego did. He has always had a knack for these big moments, especially inside of 15 laps to go. That is where he shines, and it's ironic because he's led the most laps twice this season in races. He lost both of them. Tonight, I should say Saturday night, he only led, I believe, the final 6 laps, obviously taking the lead when it matters most and going on to go to victory lane as a result. And that's the 5th time in his 8 career wins that he has led less than 15 laps and went to victory lane at the end of the day. So, like he kind of established that when he burst onto the scene nearly a decade ago with his first career win, only leading the final 2 laps and spoiling Norm Lester's dominant performance at Belltown way back in 2015. That was his first career win. Now he's at 8, nearly a decade later. And I still think that Renner has some substantial amount of abilities left in the tank, if I can talk. I still think he has a substantial amount left in the tank. No matter where he goes, I think he's going to be in championship contending equipment regardless. I think he has a better shot at Michael White Racing than a Taylor Motorsports just because they're more established. But I mean, Michael White Racing has also not won a race this season through the first 13 events of 2024. So that's also obviously a big problem. But I still think that Michael White Racing is the more proven commodity. Taylor Motorsports has had their ups and downs with their NDRL drivers coming over and participating in the races. Easily their best around the season was, I should say, Jesse Rice III's running the Windows 300, where he was top 5 all night long before, unfortunately, his engine blew up about 30 or so laps before the finish. So they're just a lot more unproven, but they have brought home, I believe, what was it, back-to-back 8th place finishes at Denver and Ajax with Levi Duncan and Noah Davis. So it seems like they're starting to hit their stride a bit recently. Adam Petty Jr. finished, I believe, 14th, a couple laps down in the 200. So, if you put Renner in that car, I believe he could elevate it to, at least somewhat a top 10 car on a weekly basis. I really do. So they're just kind of trying to ink that big name, big money driver, bring him in and really kind of go from there. So yeah, it's just kind of a tough situation, tough deal for Renner, 2 really quality organizations that he has to choose between. And I think that, like I said, this performance goes to show why there's such a bidding war for his services, because in such a big race, a big spot, once again, Renner comes up clutch. The second most crown jewel wins all time of any driver, not guys like Jimmy Hood, Randall Woods, Nick Urquidy, Dan Rogers, some of these other all-time greats. They do not have, the wins to compete against Renner. Like Rogers has 3, Urquidy has 1, Nick Urquidy, that is, Diego, of course, has 6, Jimmy Hood has 3, and like they don't have the big race wins that Renner does. And if he can just translate that speed to be more consistent throughout the course of a season, which I think a change of scenery could certainly help out with that. I certainly think that we could see Brynn Renner, winning a title, a championship before it's all said and done. Before he hangs it up, I really do think that he could win a championship. After all, he did finish second in points in 2021. Do not forget that. So I think a championship is certainly in the cards for Renner. Obviously we're going to see on that one, but it is what it is. And for Ronnie Woods Motorsports, what a season it has been. They've got league-leading 5 wins this season, and they are the first team in ASC history not just to sweep the Crown Jewel events in a season, the Ajax 200, Northern 200 and the Windows 300 all in the same season, but also finished 1-2 in every single last one of those events. Like, how do you pull that off? That is an insane amount of dominance. Let's be real. And it's something that we might not ever see again. And the crazy part is that even with all this dominance, they lead the league in wins. They finished 1-2 in all three crown jewel events. They still do not hold the points lead. In at the cup level. Obviously, doing Craftsman with Colin Ward, and we'll get into that in a second. But at the cup level, they still do not hold the points lead, and they're still on the outside looking in, needing some help if they want to take home the 2024 Ajax Cup Championship. And at the end of the day, wins are nice, but obviously the championship is what it's all about. This is why we're all here. And so, yeah, that's pretty much that on the win aspect for Renard. But let's talk more about the fallout of how he got the job done. And basically, it was barging Carson Schmidt out of the way, putting him in the fence, and driving off and stealing it. And that's not normally the way you see Brynn Renard win these types of races. He even said it himself, like, I don't like to race like that. Obviously, I wish I had gotten it done differently. But it's kind of a sticky situation because at the stone yard it is borderline impossible to race side by side. Obviously, it can be done, and passes have been made in the corners before, but when it's 6 laps to go, we're talking a crown jewel trophy on the line. The gloves are off, man. The gloves are off. And, some would say Rubbin's racing. Some would say, oh, if you can't make a clean pass, don't be on the track like Carson Schmidt would. I just kind of think it's a racing deal. Honestly, I kind of chalk it up to just a racing deal at the end of the day. It's obviously you got to feel for Carson Schmidt leading a career high 116 laps. He looked like he easily had the best car, but on that final run, I don't know what adjustment they made for Renard or for Schmidt that kind of brought them together, because it looked like Schmidt had the field covered for, I would say, the first 3/4 of this race, but on that final run, Renard made one last charge to the front and obviously ended up getting there, catching Schmidt, and then pulling off that move. I agree that it was now or never for Renard to make that move? No, but I can see what his point is, because obviously tire wear is so tough to deal with here, and it's so finicky on a track like this. Your tires can go off like that if you use them too much. So it's a tough situation. I really would just chalk it up to a racing deal. And like I said, obviously you feel bad for Carson Schmidt. You hate to see him lose one like that, especially when you're so close to your first one. You're so close to that first career win, and you lose it like that. That would certainly leave a bitter taste in my mouth. And if I would say I wouldn't be happy either. But I just think it's a racing deal. Honestly, it's a crown jewel race. Inside of 10 laps to go, the gloves are off, man. The gloves are off, especially at a track like this where it's so tough to pass on. I would consider what Renner did like a bump and run at a Belltown or something like that. Really, I really would. So that's just racing, man. That's racing at the Ajax Cup level, man. It's not fair. It's not fair. It never will be fair. It is not meant to be fair. We just want to see a good show from the best of the best in the ASCA. And I'd say Renner and Schmidt certainly put on that show. But at least for Carson Schmidt, he proved a lot of people wrong. A lot of people refer to him as TikTok boy because he's got the 4 million followers on TikTok and all that. But I think he proved, he's had his moments this season, like at West Virginia. I look at that one where he obviously he had such a fast car early on, qualifier and pole, but obviously got loose underneath Cameron Atwood and took both of them out late in the going. He's had some moments this season where you'd be like, what is he doing out there? But you've also seen some flashes like Belltown, where he drove from 18th to third at the end of the day. And then this race where he leads a career high 116 laps at a track as tough as the Stone Yard, mind you. Like, I really do think that while he is the same age as LaQuan Scranton, just a couple months younger, and while obviously Scranton is just on another level compared to Schmidt is kind of taking that usual growth and development we see out of a guy that's 21 years old. I think it's kind of been distorted because we've seen what Scranton has done at Schmidt's age, and we're like, okay, that's what a young driver is supposed to be like. But no, not at all. Um, especially on a team that's been perpetually awful in this number 12 car, formerly number 43, driven by Henry Brady, one of the biggest ASCA busts of all time. Grant Von Duvedel, arguably the biggest one-hit wonder in ASCA history. Like, he has had his work cut out for him in this car that's basically been forgotten throughout the years that are Keedy Bros Racing. And he's finally starting to make him respectable, it looks like, at such a young age. I really do think that the team made the right decision extending him for another year. And I think that in the offseason, they really need to work on a long-term contract extension. I really think that. I think Schmidt showed us a lot in this race and that he's going to be here to stay in this sport for a long time to come if Keedy Bros Racing does not screw this up. They got to give him a couple years. Like, Shane Park was not the driver that he is today, this championship contender, second in points. He was not that driver at 21 years of age. Um, they got to give him some more time to develop. And don't be fooled by what you're seeing out of Laquan when it comes to what a 21-year-old driver should be. Like, no, take a step back. Laquan is an anomaly. He is in another league of his own. Carson Schmidt is kind of more towards the norm, slowly but surely developing. And I think that in the next couple of years, he's going to be the future of Rikitti Bros Racing, considering, Diego and Nick are now in their mid 30s. So he is the future of that team. And they need to, I think, really consider locking him up to a long-term contract extension. But I don't know. That's just me. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much it on that soliloquy on that late race incident. I just think it's kind of a racing deal. Um, especially at a track like the Stone Yard, there's really not much you can do when it comes to trying to make a pass instantly or immediately. When you don't have time to waste, you got to get that pass made, or else that's what you have to do. So, um, yeah, it just it is what it is. And now, kind of moving on to another Urquidy Bros Racing driver. We just talked about him briefly, but that would be Diego Urquidy. 3 races separate him from his record-tying World Championship, and he further extended his points lead to 28 over Shane Park, thanks to his 7th place finish compared to Park's 8th place finish. Todd Kidd actually kind of asserted himself as a title contender once more. He's 1 point back in third, but again, he's kind of in the same boat as Park, and so is Scranton for that matter, even after his rough outing, finishing a lap down in 12th. But it's a really, can anyone stop Diego? Basically, that is the question. And the shocking part for Diego is he led nearly twice as many laps on Saturday night with 78 as he had the entire season before this. Yet he's been so dominant this year, and he's kind of lulled the field to sleep, honestly. Like, he's done it not via the normal flashy Diego style, and that's racking up his 3 wins before going on to win the title and dominating a bunch of races, leading a bunch of laps, getting involved in a bunch of controversy. No, he's taken a completely different approach to things this year. And it's really interesting and kind of weird to watch in a way. Um, Diego using much more finesse instead of aggression to work his way to a championship. And I think it's an incredibly smart business decision on his part. Obviously, as he continues to age and get older, you obviously don't want to continually be involved in fights and controversy and all that stuff week after week after week. That stuff takes a toll on you. And we saw last year how it directly cost Diego the championship. His incident with Ayers and the Northern 200, and then of course his incident with Scranton at the end of the Apple 225. If he wasn't involved in the rivalries between those two drivers, those multi-year rivalries, I should say, with those two drivers, I think Diego actually probably wins the 2023 championship. And yeah, I know he DNF the last 3 weeks straight or something crazy like that, or 4 out of the last 5 races. Obviously, he kind of fell apart down the stretch, but again, it was due to the incidents with Ayers and Scranton. And I believe it was ironically both of those two that caused each of those DNFs. Because he had won the one race he didn't DNF down the stretch, he won at West Virginia. And like that 22 team was really starting to hit their stride towards the end of the season and really starting to get things on track. And it looked like they might be the only person that had something for Atwood once Randall Woods and the 18 bunch fell apart. And it was, his past transgressions with Ayers and Scranton that did him in basically. And it seems like Diego kind of took a step back with his weekly therapy sessions and his new wife and all this and that. And he's learned tremendously about, much more finesse. I think the only really kind of questionable incident he's had this season was with Ross Jackson at AdvoCare, and even still, I can just call that a racing deal. Just drove it in the corner too deep. But he hasn't had any incidents with Ayers, hasn't had any incidents with Scranton, or pretty much with any other driver besides Jackson for that reason. Like he has stayed out of trouble completely. And that's exactly why he has 11 top 10 finishes compared to everyone else's 9 or less. So 3 races remaining. Diego, the Apple 225, we all know what happened in this race last season. And even go back to 2022, where Keedy had the dominant car. He led the most laps by far, and he had a penalty in the pits. 2021, he did finish second in this race, if I recall correctly. I know in 2020 he finished fourth. So he has a pretty solid track record throughout the years in this event. And of course, he's won here 3 times. Granted, all have come in the Windows 300 and not the Apple 225. But I still think that, a guy who's won at a track 3 times, like he is going to be, the one of the favorites, one of the guys to beat, one of the guys to watch. And I'll be shocked if Diego isn't running up towards the front throughout most of the day. Somewhere within the top 5, top 10, especially, considering how Urquidy Bridge Racing was here last year with, I believe Urquidy qualified outside pole, if I recall correctly. I know Schmidt won pole and then didn't lead any laps, but, like Urquidy Bridge Racing kind of high speed, aero sensitive package this year. Like it's been relatively solid. Obviously, it was really good at West Virginia before Brynn Reynolds showed up and kind of spoiled their party. And then he had the pit penalty, and then Urquidy ended up striking their weight at the end. But yeah, they were kind of meh at what was it? The Windows 300 earlier this season. Really not much to take home when it came to that race. Just the kind of man performance. Urquidy was 6th, which I mean, a man performance being 6th is pretty damn good. I must say so myself. But 3 races remaining. Computer, West Virginia, Belltown. I think the only one that really concerns me for Diego is Belltown, but there's a really good chance he has his championship locked up before then, because we all know he's won the last 2 races at West Virginia. So, like basically all signs point towards Diego winning the title. And like I said earlier, for Park, Kidd, Scranton, you have to win. No ifs, ands, or buts. You have to win. It all comes down to that. You need a win and you need help. That's it. That's what it comes down to. They just haven't been as consistent as the 22 team throughout the year. And Diego has by far been the best driver. He hasn't been the fastest driver. He hasn't led the most laps, not even close to the most laps led. Hasn't won the most races, but he's got the most top tens. I believe he has the most top fives as well. That's what matters at the end of the day. Consistency, not wins, are what get you championships. And Diego is proving it right here, right now. Now, as we turn our heads to a much closer title fight, boy, if you aren't watching the Craftsman Series this year, you are missing out on what has just been an incredible season of action in the most competitive Craftsman Series field in history. It seems like literally every week there's a new batch of guys out front, and every week it seems like there's a new kind of storyline when it comes to the championship battle. Really, no driver outside of what Graham Darty after West Virginia has had what commanding double-digit point lead. I know Ward had one earlier in the season, but then he had his back-to-back DNFs, and boom, that points lead went straight out the window. So, like, no one's been able to really pull away. And we saw that again in the Lilly Diabetes 100, where Ward and Darty entered the race, within 1 point of each other. And then Darty gets taken out in a lap one accident. Chad Nelson, I'm not sure what he was doing, just drove it in the corner way too deep, got loose underneath Will Moon, and took out Darty, who just had nowhere to go starting mid pack. He got lucky to avoid the lap one accident at what was it? Ajax Super Speedway, but this time around, not quite. So obviously he was unable to avoid that. And then Colin Ward, man, I don't know, he just didn't show up. He said in a post-race interview that this was the most evil race car he has ever driven in his life. And it certainly showed, because he dropped outside the top 10 relatively quickly after the restart and just continued to drop back, and then pounded the wall, blew a right front tire. Before you know it, he was out of the race. So, Darty and Ward out of the race well before halfway. Marcus Edwards has to be absolutely salivating right now. Last week's big winner at Ajax Super Speedway, he's salivating, rubbing his hands like, I finally got a chance. I'm running second, leaving the pits. I just got to bring it home here. Bring home a top 5 finish. This championship is mine. And then he's busted for speeding, exiting pit road. Like, are you kidding me? Does anyone want to win the 2024 Craftsman Series Championship at this point? I honestly don't think so, based on what I've been seeing, man. These guys are just, I don't know, it's just been such a fantastic championship fight. And this one, I think, is going to go down as one of the best of all time. And it seems like the Craftsman Series never disappoints when it comes to these championship battles. Every single year, it comes down to the final race at Belltown. And this year seems to be no exception. Um, Especially when you consider that we have 2 short track races under the lights to close out the campaign at Advocare Speed Park and Belltown Speed Park. Like, can you draw up a better final 2 races of the season than that? I like, man, this title fight is like, it's wide open for the taking. Even Sean Wooden, 15 points back, do not count him out either. He's obviously won the Barrymore 125 in the past and ran really well in the Geico 100 last season with a shot at the championship as well. So it's going to be really, really tight to kind of see who takes home this championship. And mind you, the Barrymore 125 last year, photo finish between, guess who? Graham Darty and Colin Ward. And of course, Darty was able to hold on and bring home his first Craftsman Series victory, the youngest winner in ASC history at just the age of 17. And only his second start, mind you. That's the craziest part. Only a second start at the age of 17. He qualifies on pole and he wins the damn race. Insane. And he's taken um shown that race, that potential, that was not a fluke at all. And he's certainly carried that over to the 18-year-old rookie sensation he's been throughout this season. But when it comes to who's going to win this championship, honestly, um, come on now. When it comes to Craftsman Series stuff over the course of the past 2 years, I have learned more often than not to not bet against Colin Ward. And I know that Marcus Edwards has easily been, I would say, the hottest of the three drivers so far. He's had the most speed recently, consistently out of these three. But I look at Ward and I look at how he held off Wooden to win the championship last season. And I know that this season the points cushion is not nearly as big as it was last season. And he didn't nearly choke what was the 30-point margin over Wooden down the stretch. But I still I still look at Colin Ward and I'm like, you know what? I really think he's got what it takes to go back to back. If there's any driver that's going to become the first to do that, it's going to be Colin Ward. That's just my opinion on it, honestly. So I think that Ward's got it. I really do. Especially considering his track record at Advocare, finishing second um in this race last season by inches, mind you, to Graham Doherty. And you look at Belltown, um, I believe he finished top five when he needed to in the championship race last year. So I know that Doherty certainly is a threat as well, considering he obviously won the last time the Craftsman Series won at Advocare and at Belltown, the most recent race there, he finished second. So he's certainly a threat. I think Edwards is certainly a threat. Considering he won at Belltown before. So a lot of these guys are proven. And Sean Wooden also a threat. If the top three want to wreck each other at Advocare, hey man, who knows? Sean Wooden could still very well steal this one. But it's gonna be wild, a wild final two races. I am stoked to break down the preview, the Body Armor 125 next week under the lights. I really think that's gonna be a super fun race. And I cannot wait to see what sort of action goes down. It's going to be a late one too. 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is when that race is slated to start. So super late race for us East Coasters. For the West Coasters, they're like, what, bro? It's 6 p.m. We still got plenty of hours of daylight left. So we're gonna see, but it's gonna be a fun one. And this championship battle, let me just say it right now, far from over. Now it's time to move on to silly season. And this might be the most shocking move of silly season so far, if you don't count Michael White Racing not picking up Norm Lester's team option. And that would be Lucas Sambert to Snoots Enterprises on a 2-year, $2 million contract to drive the number 8 car next season. Now, obviously, we know for Snoots Enterprises that they are not in a good state with their Craftsman Series program right now. Their two drivers, I believe, are sitting 14th and 16th in the standings. So there's no denying that Lance Davidson and Chad Nelson are far from ready to be put in a cup car right now. And we saw what happened the last time that they, kind of rushed a driver up to cup before they were ready, aka Bryce Van, because they needed an answer to Shane Park getting poached from Ronnie Wood's Motorsports. So they threw Bryce Van up to cup. And even in Snoots Enterprises' defense, Bryce Van was super consistent. He just hadn't won a race. He was fourth in points in 2022. Like, he was up there. You thought that even despite his lack of wins, that maybe he'd figure it out at the cup level. And here we are. What is it? 29 starts later, he still doesn't even have a top 10 finish. His teammate has more wins than Man has top 10 finishes. That that tells you all you need to know about Bryce Mann right now. and how much of a disaster that hire has been. So when it comes to that, they saw that and they knew that promoting Davidson and or Nelson would be a bad idea. And when you have a driver, I think that is the caliber of a Lucas Sambert, who for some reason Flores Motorsports decided to get rid of, when I think they're really actually starting to build towards something. Something special was brewing with that 95 team. I mean, Sam Bayer is, what is he, 14th in points last I checked, outrunning a Michael White racing car, a Ronnie Woods Motorsports entry, a CJ Barrymore racing entry. Um, like outrunning the flagship Tico Bound Motorsports entry, you name it. Like that team so far this year has been the little team that could. Three top fives, five top 10 finishes for Sam Bayer. Um, I have no idea why, they decided to get rid of him. And putting Tommy Woods in the car is certainly a downgrade for that team. I know that Sam Bayer is pushing 30 and will be 30 next season. But my goodness. I mean, technically, isn't being 30 a good thing? The prime of his career, at least getting in the prime of his career, I should say. I think Stoops Enterprises kind of saw that and they're like, you know what? Let's give him a shot. Let's bring him in. And that's the crazy part about it, is that Lucas Sambayer is 2 years older than Greg Healy. And obviously, we know the success that Healy has had throughout his ASCA tenure to date, while Sambayer will just be entering his fourth Cup season in 2025, and he's got no victories in the ASCA. But I really do think that this is a really solid hire for Snoots Enterprises. I think that once they kind of saw that they weren't going to win the Norm Lester sweepstakes. I mean, not the Norm Lester sweepstakes, the Brynn Renard sweepstakes. I don't know if they were even entered in the Norm Lester sweepstakes, because from the sounds of it, they had kind of zeroed in on Sam Bayer for quite a bit once they knew that they weren't going to win the Renard sweepstakes, and once they knew they didn't have a realistic shot. And why they did that is because they knew they could get Sam Bayer on the cheap, only $1 million a season, while Greg Healy is up for contract renewal at the end of 2026. So obviously their number one goal is to work on getting a long-term deal done with their superstar championship winning driver. But I really do think that bringing in Sam Bayer to be his sidekick, his wingman, and even something else that was acknowledged was how much Sam Bayer can really help out Healy on the road courses. And I think that's a super underrated aspect of this hiring, is like you put Sam Bayer in, championship winning equipment on these road courses, he could be right up there with the likes of Sheehan Park and Laquan Scranton and Nick Orchidi and Randall Woods and some of these other guys competing for race wins. Honestly, even Colin Ward, put him up there with that. He's going to be right up there with those guys next season. I really think so. So, yeah, I think this is a pretty good hire for Suits Enterprise, especially when you consider it's basically a prove-it contract, only $1 million a season, for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, when we come to the end of the 2026 season, if Sam Bear's not getting the job done, you let him walk. No, no harm, no foul. And hopefully by then you have a Craftsman development prospect that's ready to go to take his place, or maybe Slim Bear proves to be the long-term answer, the long-term sidekick that Healy needs at Suits Enterprises. To kind of help them both out. Because we've certainly seen the dip in Healy's performance, especially this season, without a competitive teammate up there. And specifically the past 2 years, he's only won races at Belltown since 2023. So there has been a noticeable dip in the performance of the three team once Shane Park departed. And I think part of that is due to not having, a competitive teammate to kind of learn and research off of. What are you going to learn from a guy that's running, 17th every week, honestly, while, you're up inside the top 10, top five. So I think this is a good move. Samir obviously has a lot to prove. Like I said, he's pushing 30. He will be 30 next season. So he's got to perform right off the bat if he wants to keep this ride. And this is probably going to be his final shot in the ASCA. But I certainly think he's got a good chance to prove that he was worth this contract. And yeah, I'm certainly excited to see the pairing of Healy and Sam Bear at Team Enterprises next season. It's certainly going to be a fun one. So that's it for the silly season aspect. And then there was also a teaser that Michael White Racing is holding their press conference next week. So we finally get to see who's going to be in the 19 next season. And I think with Sam Bear being in the 8 now, I think all eyes point to Brynn Redder to the 19. I think basically, obviously, because Luster can't go there. And are you do you really think they're going to bring in a guy like a Derek Lewis or Bryce Mann? Bro. So I think this pretty much puts all eyes on Bryn Renard to Michael White Racing. And we'll see if that ends up being the case, or maybe they shock us. Maybe they end up promoting Tony Del Val the second to the 19. Who knows? But yeah. So now, after all that, it's time to preview this week's race, the Apple 225. And I feel like we previewed it quite a bit earlier, but I think there's a few other storylines we need to talk about a bit here. CJ Barrymore Racing. Boy, it's been a disastrous last month for them with all the incidents their drivers have been involved in. Chris Barrymore, Cameron Atwood, Ryan Dixon. Just this is going to be a year I think they all want to forget, honestly. And but for Atwood, he led the most laps in this race last season. He really wasn't a factor at all, though, in the Windows 300, which was shocking before his accident. Like, he was struggling. So I question how good he's going to be, in this race. But I certainly think that at Computer Motor Speedway, the 17 car we've always seen is a threat. It's always going to be a factor at that track, that car, that number, that team. And then of course Chris Barrymore, another guy that was a total non-factor, no-show in the Windows 300. I think that's going to change this time around, especially after the rough past couple weeks that he's had. I think that Barrymore really needs a bounce back performance, and I think he's going to show up and show out in a big way in this one. So, yeah. So keep an eye on Atwood and Barrymore. I would expect them to perform much better. Well, I think Atwood ran a pretty solid race in the Northern 200, but for Barrymore, I'd expect him to perform much better than he did at the Stone Yard. When it comes to where Keedy Bros racing, I think Carson Schmidt once again is going to be a big threat. The Urquidy brothers, Nick obviously won this race back in 2020. Diego had to lead laps here the past couple years, from a second in 2021. I think he's certainly going to be a threat as well. Ronnie Woods Motorsports, Todd Kidd, Shane Park finished 1-2 the last time we were at Computer Motor Speedway earlier this season in the Windows 300. That was about a month ago, little over a month ago, you could say. So yeah, they're obviously going to be factors, as is I think Bryn Redder and Ross Jackson as well. They were just kind of swept up in unfortunate incidents early in the going. And then turning our attention to Laquan Scranton, led the most laps here in the Windows 300 earlier this season, won the All-Star race, won this race last year. He is the defending Apple 225 winner, especially considering the fact that he needs a win. You certainly cannot count him out, to say the least. And I certainly don't think you can count out Greg Healy as well. We just talked about him a lot. And obviously the struggles that team has had this year. It's hard to believe Healy is still winless this season, as is Randall Woods, as is Nick Urquidy, 3 past champions winless in 2024, really kind of showing a changing of the guard atop the sport. But I really think that Healy, he sat on pole for the Windows 300 earlier this season, led some laps. I certainly think that he is going to be a factor in this race as well. Good opportunity for him to score his first win in 2024. We'll see if he's able to get the job done. And yeah, like, it's going to be, I think it's a toss up because there's so many drivers that have a realistic shot of winning this race. Notice how I didn't mention any Michael White racing drivers because I just see nothing that indicates to me that they're going to have speed. Race winning speed, I should say. Like I think they could have top five speed with a guy like a Randall Woods or a Jared Ayers, but they have not had race winning pace in, I would say, any race this season, especially like they've had pace early on, with Ayers and Bennett kind of earlier on in the season, but they really teetered off, um, especially the second half of the season where I thought they would kind of ramp up, but they've teetered off. They've really just been irrelevant this year. And so, yeah, I am very bearish when it comes to Michael White Racing and having a shot to win this race. I would not bank on that like at all. So not looking good for them. We'll see. Maybe Randall Woods can prove me wrong for betting against him, but I'm just not seeing it right now with them. So that's it for who I think has a realistic shot. There's a lot of drivers that could be up there towards the front. Obviously, practice and qualifying is going to tell us a bunch about who will end up being at the front. But my pick to win this race, got to go with the guy that won here earlier in the season, the most recent winner at Computer Motor Speedway. That would be Todd Kidd. Um, Kidd just, it's been a while, obviously, since he went to victory lane, but the speed is still there. He just finished second in the Northern 200 last week. He needs a win to get himself back in the championship fight. My eyes are on Todd Kidd, honestly, and I think he's going to be able to get the job done. So keep an eye on that number 9. I think he's going to get the job done, really kind of assert himself back in the championship fight as much as he possibly can. He's obviously going to need a lot of help out of Diego, but we'll see. We shall see come Saturday afternoon at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. But that is it for this edition of the ASCA Weekly Podcast. Appreciate all 2 of you that have listened this far in the going. Once again, shout out to the ASC's premier partners as well. Rowdy Energy, Circle B Diecast, Plan B Sales. Be sure to use coupon code ASCA for free shipping on any orders $20 more. And of course, at Payne Scheme Stock on Instagram. Go give him a follow as well. And that's it for this edition of the ASC Weekly Podcast. As I just said, we'll see you to recap the Apple 225 in a week's time and preview the penultimate week of the campaign.